Transportation Committee. I apologize for going to meeting this fast, but I have heard from others that want to get our transportation bill out today. We're going to probably do it Tuesday, but a lot of things are happening on Tuesday, so I just want to make sure we update ourselves on the reporting section. We haven't gone over this for a while. So who would like to tell us where we are on the reporting section? Anthea or someone?
So
What are we following? Yeah.
I provided you with a section by section summary document. It's the color, yep, that one, 20 pages, I believe it is. And then I know that you have gotten it.
I got my introduction.
Yep.
So
And then
You have this, Senator?
I have that. I
To
have
know
that.
who you're gonna hand off to?
Yeah, so, yeah, we have that list. I go to Senator Perchlik, and then everybody's got their sections. Do we go back and forth with the sections, or you do them all at one time? or how do you
Oh,
do
let's
that?
go, let's go. Yep,
We'll just have to yield back and forth.
right, we'll yield back and forth. We know who to yield to.
It'll be like a tennis.
Senator Perchlik's gonna yield to myself. I'm gonna yield to Senator Chittenden. He's gonna yield to Perchlik, and then
Back to
that back to Chittenden, back to me, and I'm back to Chittenden. And then and Chittenden is gonna let you wrap it up.
Where are we all following? You said the page is.
Right here, Senator. Do you have this?
Right here, yeah.
Oh, when are we all following? I think we're all gonna follow our own little.
Is this what we're reporting?
that is the section by section summary that I prepared. I think Senator Ingalls is talking about a yield sheet. And then the two things that will not be
No,
reflected.
that one I know. I got that.
Right.
I'm just saying reporting.
Right. I think we're all gonna do our own thing. I think we're all getting just comfortable about how we
Okay,
wanna
all right,
report
you
it.
know,
Yep.
we're following the same pattern, or everybody's doing their own thing. or-
I think that what we ought to do is Senator Chittenden had a question. And so if we got some questions about what we're gonna report on, let's just ask those and get clarification.
Senator Kitchell, we didn't do anything because we had the
I'm doing an
appropriation.
amendment, so I'm putting in the 3 million for paving, the 3.5 for your garage, and $1 million for trails.
Okay.
When do we go to you then?
So,
You don't, I'm gonna have to get up and report for appropriation.
Okay.
Just doing the appropriations.
okay, I'm gonna let Senator Chittenden ask, and then I'm gonna go back to Jane.
Let me ask this.
No, you don't have to go back to.
No, I gotta ask questions.
But I have a question related
Two of
to
the
this before, if that's okay.
Why don't we just go there? Yeah, we're good.
So on section 3, all I'm doing is taking them out and then they're
Getting added back in.
appropriations are
Yeah,
putting them back in under
under this, the cash fund.
the cash. Still general funds, but through the.
Special funds, they've been redefined in.
Super duper special.
Capital, all, everything fund.
And I mean, one thing you could say there is just this committee didn't address it because they knew Senate Appropriations was gonna be taking it up. So you always knew that section.
I can just say this will be addressed in the Senate appropriations amendment. Okay, that was my question.
Sarah Kitchell, you're going to talk about, when are you gonna speak first? You're doing the amendments before we present the bill?
No,
Or
after.
after? So.
The bill gets sent to appropriations. I'm reporting for the
after
Committee on Appropriations that we moved it favorably and amended and go through my 3 instances of them.
So I have section 4 and 5. One references the St. Albans District Maintenance, so I can say that Senator Kitchell will speak about this after we report the bill.
Or you can just say this will be affected by the Appropriations Committee amendment.
Amendment, and then like section 5 is the same way.
Yep.
I can say the same thing now, that are, just so I'm clear, because I thought we had 3 million in that, but you just said $1 million. Are we adding another $1 million, or did we cut it back to $1 million?
For the.
Or number 5, the rail trail?
Yeah, it's $1 million.
It's $1 million, okay.
So I think the best way to think about these sections is section 3 gives what the funding source and amount is. Section 4 and section 5 adds them to the white book. So section 3, there wasn't any money for it and you needed to wait for Senate appropriations to find money for it. Senator Kitchell's going to talk about that. Section 4 adds the project to the book. Section 5 adds the project to the book. You'll need to hear about the funding later. I think that's the easiest way to think about these 3 sections.
It probably makes sense to do together with section 3.
I was gonna say that. You want me to take over section 3?
Yeah, or I could take over 4 or 5.
Well, then no, you have enough to do.
Okay.
Yeah, you might even more than I do. So
Let's go to Caledonia Airport.
I'll do section 3. I'm doing the amendment of, oh, thank you for that. We gotta find that.
And doing the amendment.
After you do your the report on the bill as it left Senate Transportation, you then need to do your Senate Finance piece, because it went to Senate Finance before it went to Senate Appropriations.
Right.
And that's for the mileage-based user fee, and the fact that the fees are no longer there.
We don't have an amendment, we just
No.
reported it favorably.
You just reported it favorably, you reviewed the mileage-based user fee, made no changes, and you talked about the fact that the fees weren't there anymore. The fees are gonna be, they've already made their way to the other body, that was all dealt with the last 2 days.
Unanimous, you recall, it was 601.
It was 601, Senator Gray made the motion, but then he left the room before it left. So I feel like it's kind of 700.
Can are we done on that? So I have a question on the why for section 7 and section 38. Okay, but can you tell me the why for section 7? I see what it's doing.
Yeah, so the Transportation Alternatives Grant Program is entirely federal funding, and under the IIJA, the amount that's being made available for transportation alternative grants was doubled for the balance of the IIJA. Under state law, grant amounts can only be up to 300,000. This is allowing the grant awards to be larger, doubled up to 600,000 for the fiscal years that correspond with the IIJA.
Why does it say that 300K cap?
Why does it say have a cap? That'd be a question for your predecessors, but there is one in statute.
Yeah, I can answer that. I think that historically there was, a limited pool of funding, like there still is, but it's bigger. And we wanted to provide the opportunity for as many towns to participate as possible. And by setting a cap, that sort of gave guidance to the agency in terms of how much money could come from that grant source to fund the projects the municipalities were being granted.
How long has it been 300K?
A long time.
But we don't need to change that because it's we don't bump into this too
So
often.
if you want to know about the progression of the language, the agency's original version of the T-bill just raised it to 600,000. House Transportation wanted it to be time limited because of the fact that we don't know if the IIJA amounts are going to stay into the future. And this is definitely something where if the amount of money that's being made available to the state for the program is going to stay at the increased amount, probably a conversation for the future.
And the why in section 37,
Where are you?
extension, section 37, extension of P3 sunset.
Oh, yep. So I think Michelle's gonna be able to give you more information on this, but when it was put into law a few years ago to give the agency the authority to enter into this specifically defined P3 partnerships, it was set to sunset on July 1 of 2023. They haven't entered into any of them yet, but they might, and they did a lot of work to put themselves in the ability to be able to enter into them, and it's thought that some of them might be related to charging stations.
Okay, so for charging stations.
It could be charging stations, it could be welcome centers, it could be any number of things. So we just feel that there's value.
Could be a siding.
Yeah, could be a rail siding, which we already have a program for. Yeah.
So I can plan my sunset joke. Why have we not just put this into statute? Why do we just keep extending the sunset?
Go ahead. The House wanted it to have a sunset, an extended sunset. The agency wanted it to be put into codified law. I will say that if you were to put it into codified law, it's not as simple as repealing the sunset language. So instead of amending what you see for section 37, it's not as simple as repealing the language in session law that said it was sunset, because the structure of the chapter describes it as a pilot program. But you certainly could, at some point between now and July 1 of 2026, ask me to rewrite the chapter to strip out pilot and make it be an in perpetuity program until, of course, the General Assembly decides they want to get rid of it.
We love sunsets. My last question, you said yield sheet. What is the yield sheet?
Just what Senator Ingalls was talking about, saying
Yield.
I now yield to.
Yield
the-
sheet, thank you.
Okay.
Okay.
You're
Not like a
Vacation
yield
yield.
sign,
Okay.
no MUTCD stuff, just
Or not education yield bill, which you're
Right.
hopefully gonna get out.
We're working on this Saturday.
Oh, okay.
So I have a question
Go ahead.
on section, like all this stuff about the vehicle incentive program. We're repealing it, that's just so we can codify it, we need to repeal it for session law.
I mean, theoretically, you wouldn't need to, the later enacted version would control, but it would create so much confusion if there was this like now obsolete language stuck in session law when you can just repeal it and start fresh with your codified law versions, which will be so much easier to find and amend and look up because they'll just be in the green books and on the website in statute form.
And we're not making any changes to all the incentive programs in 15. We're just codifying.
You're codifying them and then you are giving the agency a little bit more flexibility in terms of like the incentive amounts can be up to, giving them the ability to shift the base MSRP a little bit. You're not giving them flexibility on income eligibility, but you are making these incentives available to more Vermonters and you're making the incentives for Vermonters with lower income available to more Vermonters. So you're lifting those caps a teeny bit. But for those three programs, there are not significant changes being made aside from flexibility to hopefully be in a position where you don't need to amend codified law every year as vehicles get more expensive or the agency determines the incentive amounts need to change to better address the goals of the state.
And that's like, that's all spelled out in this appendix.
Yeah.
Under the appendix is organized by program.
Yeah.
Not by section.
Correct. But you'll see there will be statutory citations in the right column, so you can like link back to the sections in the bill. I think Appendix A is the easiest way to see how the programs are changing in the minimal ways that they're changing.
Are we giving this out, or is that just for,
No, it's just
We have nothing to give out unless we want to give something out.
no, the more you give out,
Yeah, that's what I thought.
unless,
They don't read it anyway.
Or they just could be.
Yeah.
Ask questions.
and then you have to be able to answer.
That's right, that's right.
Oh, no, that's the-
You were good at the budget. This is good. I like it.
Okay, that's why I get paid so much.
And that's why you get double pay.
Section 16, we have to
Please.
do that authorization. That we codified it.
So section 16 in the big bill and the T bill last year, there were very large amounts of money in comparison to prior years that were put towards those three programs with the expectation that the money would last multiple fiscal years. So there was language that said this money is used for the incentive programs for each of them established in the session law. And then I don't think this language is necessary, but it's just making it clear that the money that has been set aside for these purposes also is available for the codified versions of the programs. And just because you're repealing the session law doesn't mean you're undoing the fact that these pots of money are for these three programs.
I'm not planning to highlight the differences between what the House sent us and what we made. I'm just gonna kind of stick to this.
They don't care.
They'll like your version more.
What changes did we make to the e-bike?
The e-bike incentive program, instead of it being an $800 to $4,000 range for the MSRP, you went up to $4,000. So you got rid of that minimum. You added in the safety certification piece. Talk about your umlaut there.
I know, I can't forget that.
But
I
did
think
we
should
also
highlight
lower,
that because, I mean.
did we also lower the amount of what the e-bikes, where the funding, where the rebate started?
We just took it out the minimum.
Took out the minimum.
Okay, minimum, okay.
A $500 bike could be
And
incentivized.
we added the
not a-
umlaut. You get to cover that section?
Yeah, that's why I had to armor.
And the other change you made, very minor, but it required reporting on who had gotten an incentive. And you were concerned that that might create the expectation that it was going to be like Bob Smith got an e-bike. So you changed it to the demographics of who got.
In the report.
Yeah.
Claire Kitchell's going to Costco. Let's like.
No, I would need to get one of those bottles of vanilla extract. I go through that, so that's what I need.
Have it give you a tour, or I can just pick one up for you.
I want pure vanilla extract, and I found like somebody had a pint, I think it was, and it was,
That's
they said
what.
it was only 11 or.
That is on my list of standing things that my parents buy me from Costco is vanilla.
Best prices at Costco when you buy in bulk.
Yeah, well, if you're buying,
All right, you're gonna get a bottle of
He's
vanilla
on the air.
extract.
He's getting his rebate.
Maybe some more of that dessert you made this.
Oh my goodness gracious, that was,
Who's,
I did take vanilla.
who's doing Lindenville again?
I am.
You're doing the.
Yeah, I'm good with Leadville, yeah.
Doing that.
The draft that we have is a 2.1, that's the latest draft.
Well,
Is it in the calendar?
It's in the calendar, but if you're gonna go off a version.
I'm gonna go off a version,
copy,
yes.
It's going to be draft. No, I do not have the up-to-date version.
You're better to just refer people to the page in today's calendar.
Oh, no, wait, I do have it. Nope, sorry, this is the old one. Yes, this is it. You need the one that has Ingalls listed
You can
first.
take-
I can send it.
Okay, yeah, thank you very much.
But you want to reference the page
Page 2050,
Mhm.
2050.
in today's calendar.
Yes, you should reference tomorrow's journal.
Presuppose what phase it's gonna be on and everything that happens on the floor. I do think that that is like when you're preparing for your floor report, if you were to prepare based on the notice calendar, it's sort of frustrating with that, all the numbering shifts. Because I would like to put.
No,
page
that's why you
numbers in
just need
summary
to
document,
memorize
the
it,
other
so it doesn't
change.
have the document.
But like yesterday, to have the Ray's report, people were saying like, what page is that? But he didn't have the calendar. He was going off his like cheat sheet, so
Well, everybody kind of like this.
Yeah. there was a,
It was short. I think
Yeah, that
that's
was-
long,
I
I
know
think that's
that.
a long version.
that was the abbreviated
Yeah.
version.
All right, well,
So,
So it's still 50,000 for e-bikes and it's still 500,000 for electrified fleet, and it's still coming from the prior $3 million appropriation and authorization for replace your ride. And that's not a change from housing.
Any other questions?
but we had to do that, those sections 20 through 22, just to make those.
Exactly. And I mean, I think the thing there is, you're not putting more money towards the state suite of incentive programs for vehicles and bicycles. You are reallocating money that was already set aside for this purpose, and there is just going to be slower uptake for the programs. Also, that's part of the reason why there are some changes being made to the Replace Your Ride program, because if you think about the demand for vehicles now, people are getting like the incentive amount to just trade in their vehicles. So there's no reason to go through the Replace Your Ride.
And Mr. Chair, it kind of goes without saying, but just to remind folks, if you get a question about if there is, why there is or isn't additional money for incentive programs, it's because there's still unexpended balances from last year's budget. So last year's budget appropriated a lot of money to these programs with the explicit intent that it would take a couple years to get it out.
And if you look in section 2, you'll see the estimates for what is expected to be available for the programs in the next fiscal year.
And if anybody has a really obscure money question, I'll be there and I'm happy to answer, but the answers, you should also feel free to direct folks to the Joint Fiscal Office website, because we have all the charts that you all have had hard copies of are posted there for folks to look at as well.
what you can say, I'll get an answer before third reading.
Absolutely.
Michelle?
Yeah.
On the federal carbon reduction program.
Yeah.
the Protect program, the Protect and IIJ requirements are combined, or those two separate,
Those are two separate grant programs.
but they both require this plan?
There's a NEVI plan, there's a carbon reduction strategy plan, and there's a impact plan.
Okay, but you have to do three separate plans,
So that,
three separate plans,
3 separate plans,
But they
3
will
separate
be-
pots of money.
but they'll be similar to plans.
No,
There'll be some.
One's resilience, protect, one is carbon reduction,
Sorry, I'll get that.
CRS.
Sorry, my fault.
But so section 27, we're just giving the agency more guidance on what they need to include in these plans.
That's the scope of work from our carbon reduction strategy, if you're wondering. It was a compromise piece of language that we worked on with us.
I think if section 27 didn't exist, the reports would still be what the report was going to be.
So we're required to do what they were gonna do anyway.
But all for both of those, for the.
For everything, yes. Yeah, both
This
of them.
doesn't mention the NEVI.
Yeah, the
that was
NEVI's,
done.
we're already done, separate, sorry.
That's like,
And that the timeline is different on because that's already been approved from Federal Highway Administration. Yeah.
so we're saying, we gave you a little more guidance on the carbon reduction plan and the protect program.
They threw the Protect program mention in at the end. That wasn't a focal area for folks who were interested in how to guide us.
But the protect plan doesn't have to require anything about carbon reduction.
No, I mean, it's the resiliency, which is a result of the climate impacts from.
There's a nexus there.
There's a total nexus.
I mean, after Irene, that whole issue around our highway resiliency.
Yeah.
And
Storms
and,
size storms.
and the ditching and, the planting or using crushed rock and so forth. All of that did tie to resilience and climate change.
Resilience was also a piece of what H 101 would have put into codified law in Title 19 for the transportation policy statute sections. And when Michelle was talking about this being a compromise, I think it's the members who were involved in H 101 wanted to jump right to changing codified law. Agency is saying, let us finish this planning. And that's the link to section 28, where it requires as part of the reporting back to make recommendations on how codified law could change. And I think that's part of why the resiliency piece got pulled. I think 27 and 28 should be reported together.
Yeah, I have both of those. And all the 23 to 26 on mileage user fee. The guide reference section 26, it's basically a check button. It's like Best Buy.
Yeah.
Basically designing the program, looking at it, how would it work, how would we do it, then
Yeah.
coming back to us next year, it's like, here's what the mileage based fee would be. Do you want us to do it or not? We have to enact it again, right?
Yeah, so basically the money we're getting from the feds over the next 2 years is to operationalize. So all the bells and whistles and programming, et cetera, that's gonna need to be done at DMV and education outreach, stakeholder engagement, et cetera. And then we'll be coming back to you next year. We won't be all done with all of that, I don't expect. In fact, we probably won't even get the money to start working on it till later this year if we're lucky. The federal process is slow. So when we come back to you next year, we will probably only be letting you know, here's where we are now. And I don't think we're gonna ask you next year for the specific amount that should be the fee. Because we're not gonna implement this until July of 2025. We have like a whole nother session to lock down the fee. And I would expect that the systems are gonna be smart enough whereby, if we have an anticipation of what the fee is gonna be by the time we get to the end of April, that we'll be ready to sort of plug that into the system and so we can start go when we, get to July. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay.
So very similar to SPY, 2025. Just put the two things together.
I wouldn't if I were you.
I think you're gonna be interrogated.
We'll put the two things that the government doesn't like together. The devil. Okay,
Any other questions, comments?
you call it the MBUF at the agency. Or you use the acronym.
People do call it MBUF, but I think that sets some people on fire, so I'd stay away from that. There's no good acronym for this yet.
No.
I think it also confuses people that there are like 3 acronyms that are floating around for it. Some
Yeah.
people call it a VMT, a vehicle miles travel tax. Some people call it a road usage charge, an RUC or a RUC, and that's what the
Right.
working group was. And then this is being called the.
The PMT seems to have prior,
Yeah, I don't like
But it's
using
not-
VMT because it has too many other connotations
Right.
that can be confusing for people. So I think road use charge is probably the cleanest. Or
Right.
mileage based user fee. It just.
RUC is better than MBUF.
Yeah, You have to use the acronym, I'd go with
I
that.
didn't go as far as to say EV, so add EV in
Yeah,
there
and
because it's
make
only for EVs.
Clarification that it's only
Say,
EVs.
right.
And not, and when you say EVs, it's the all electric, battery electric, plug-in hybrid
EV
electric.
user fees,
AEV and both.
AV.
highway user
You wanna
fee.
use multiple
I
acronyms,
like
all
the
squished
AEV
together.
there.
EVA.
And the,
Give Chris time, he'll come up with a real jazzy one that you can't say in public. Yeah, we are. Yes.
Yeah, I have to remember.
Anything else?
But there's like, I know you have the appendix or the details, but the only thing to really say about this, that we, stay tuned. Get reelected. We'll find out. 2025.
There are a lot more details in Appendix B than I would have otherwise done because that was the handout that I prepared for House Ways and Means and Senate Finance, so that they could have more details about needing to go through the bill. I think the most useful part of Appendix B is going to be that last chart with the 3 columns, because it's sort of highlighting the fact that the plug-in hybrid electric vehicles are going to be not subject to the mileage-based user fee. And one of the things that you did that differs slightly from what the House had, and obviously you don't need to highlight what the House did, but you are not specifying what that increased plug-in hybrid electric vehicle registration fee is going to be, despite the fact that the administration has said they expect that it might align well with the 1.75 special fuel registration fee. So that's definitely something.
Because I was in the House version, they said 1.75.
In the intent section, it's not like anything in either version was codifying anything in statute or time.
I think the thing you can also sort of reflect on for folks is that this is going to be essentially equivalent to what people pay for the gas tax. That's the core thing. We are not trying to collect any
Just equal.
extra, just keeping it consistent.
Preservation of your tax.
So the hybrid thing won't go. I thought we were going to change when that goes into effect compared to when the.
So in S99, you just clarified current practice because when the DMV was doing their modernization project for vehicle services, they realized that some branches were interpreting the special use fuel, or I'm forgetting what it's called, to say that battery electric vehicles should be paying an increased registration fee because they don't use gas or diesel.
Right, yeah.
So that is effective July 1, 2023. So if it's a pleasure car, so what people think of as like the vehicles that you're driving that you see in all the parking lots are here. If it's battery electric, plug-in hybrid electric, internal combustion engine, no matter what, you're paying that $74 registration fee on an annual basis.
Mhm.
And then the expectation is that come July 1, 2025, it'll stay at $74 plus the $2 clean air fee for the internal combustion engine vehicles, obviously not reflecting the increased fee. It will increase to something for the plug-in hybrid electric vehicles, and it'll stay at that lower rate for the battery electric vehicles, since the battery electric vehicles will then also be paying the mileage-based user fee. So if you think about what you're going to be assessed, the internal combustion engine vehicle, it'll be registration fee, clean air fee, gas tax. Plug-in hybrid electric, it'll be increased registration fee, clean air fee, gas tax, and gas tax will be really, really low if you exclusively drive it in electric.
And that's part of the whole work that the agency's doing on all of that. And it needs enactment.
And then next means passing a law.
We'll get into what enactment means, although it seems like the governor's.
Section 8, can I ask you a question? Second bullet, I feel like we're missing a word. Eliminates the prohibition on the agency from increasing the total number of vehicles in the fleet. Okay, so that's what it's doing. It's eliminating in perpetuity, no sunset.
And that
We
would
have it in the first place, and why do we want to give that authority to trust Michelle to expand the fleet?
I can't answer all of that, but I would say why it's there is because at some point your predecessors wanted to be in control of the size of the fleet.
And now we don't want her to be, or want to be in control of the size of the fleet.
That was the consensus of this committee.
Size of what's.
Our fleet of vehicles, equipment.
If you want to go back and look at Lake Erie, multi-columned progression chart, you can see that the requirement on them not increasing the fleet has been around for a very, very long time.
And we're just getting rid of it. I'm fine with it. I'm just worried about somebody on the floor seeing this through a different lens than I am. Do you see a concern being raised about us giving them the ability to expand their fleet as they see fit?
I think in this day and age,
We're constrained by the budget.
Yeah, we still appropriate the money.
Concerned about the budget.
and are we best equipped to determine their fleet needs? They just can't spend more than they have.
Why are we expanding the definition of equipment?
Because the agency requested it, and it's sort of very narrow and doesn't actually reflect everything that's currently part of the central garage fleet.
Why does it request it?
Things like,
Backhoes maybe?
well, it could be that.
Graders, we love graders in here.
I think it had something to do with the lifts in the garage were part of this equipment framework, and so it was better to characterize it as equipment than vehicles.
Shall we
And-
have a pool in terms of how many questions you're gonna get asked?
Not very many.
Senator, no, it's not a great answer.
We should.
The answer
Wage.
aligning statute.
Instead of
what is
sports
in
betting,
the
we could
central
do.
garage. So I don't think this is going to change
It's
it.
11:30.
Michelle agrees, but now statute is
1 hour, it
actually
was 29:0
what?
Probably a lot there, you guys.
Is today the 29th?
Yeah, that is.
Yeah, it's 28.
No,
It's
this
pretty
Today's the 29th.
inaccurate.
It's 28.
22nd.
That was right.
If you can figure out.
A week later.
Say that. Acceptable,
You
but
think so?
I know I can.
Okay, anything else?
No, I gotta go
And then,
look at the calendar.
Okay, I guess we're offline. It's